he told me that he'd kissed another woman.
I just quit. It was too much for me.
We went through a rough patch. It took me a long time to forgive him.
Marriage is awesome, but it's a challenge and it requires, strength. My name is Andy Devereux, and I'm originally from New Zealand, from the deep south of New Zealand, a town called Dunedin. And I grew up in a family of 7 boys. So it was, as I said, a wonderful upbringing, great opportunities in education and sport and culture. My younger brother and I got to travel quite a bit. As Mum and Dad got a little bit older, they travelled more. I had a few older brothers who were discerning priesthood. So we got to travel to where they were, which was exciting as well.
I'm Angela. I grew up in Toowoomba in Queensland, the 8th of 11 children, and a very Catholic family, as you can imagine, with that amount of people. And my mum practicing, and my dad, he became Catholic to marry my mum. And we grew up with faith as part of our everyday life. Then when I turned 18, I had an opportunity to go over to the States to study, and I studied an education degree, which is basically a liberal arts degree. So a bit of theology and philosophy and pedagogy all thrown in. And from that, and also Spanish, which from that I had the opportunity to go to Mexico and do 3 years of missionary work in Mexico. And that, again, was a life changer.
At my birthday party, I invited a friend of mine, James Burns, and James's younger sister, Angela, who is now my wife, came along to my birthday party. It wasn't the first time I'd met Angela. I'd met Angela while she was still consecrated with Reigning Christie. And I actually met her at her sister's house here in Brisbane. It's funny how the Lord begins to weave people's lives together. And when Angela came to my birthday party, I remember it was the Panama dining room there on Smith Street in Fitzroy. And when I saw her come into the room, I knew something was different, and I guess my heart skipped a beat, and I think, this could possibly be the girl.
What attracted me to him initially was, his charm, of course, but his faith. The fact that we shared the same spirituality. I'd been, dated a few people along the way, and often I'd get a bit frustrated because I was strong in my faith and I knew what I wanted, and I found it frustrating, for want of a better word, to have to kind of be the constantly stronger person in the faith and to be pulling whoever I was dating up and saying, let's go to Mass on Sunday, or let's do this, or no, we can't do this, or but with Andy, we were on the same page. So we've been married. We got married in January 2012. So we've nearly 10 years married, which I can't believe it. It's gone very fast. And we've got 4 beautiful children. Our oldest is 7 and our youngest has just turned 1. We knew what we both wanted. We were, already in our late 20s, early 30s. We knew what we were looking for in a life partner. And but he was this perfect balance, and a greater gift I couldn't ask for. He was this great balance of sometimes I'd be the one pulling him up, and sometimes he'd be the one pulling me up. And we could always, rely on each other when we were feeling down, or when we were having a difficult time spiritually or apostolically. And that was really what drew me to Andy.
But at the same time, I know that she puts so much effort into things that, we see these things that they can irritate us, but we know that for the most part they're done with love, and then we're here to help each other out as well. So if I can help her to be a little tidier, or I point something out, I do it out of love. Obviously, we're not perfect. We can get frustrated with each other. We get annoyed with each other. Sometimes she can be pretty vocal with the kids. When they're out of line and so forth. I perhaps have more of a softer approach. But I think that's when we learned in our marriage prep course, that whole sense of your family of origin. We were brought up differently, but God is calling us together to be one, and therefore, he's going to help us make it work.
I've had the grace of being a teacher and being able to pick up work a bit more easily, and we've balanced. We've balanced it out. I've worked and he's worked. Communication can always be a challenge. It's always been our number one. This is the most important thing in marriage, but we're definitely not perfect at it. And especially the more kids we have, the more difficult it becomes to communicate well because of time. At the moment, it's dinner. Andy takes them up to Bath while I finish up with the older two. And then I put the baby to bed while he's with the other three. Then he stays with the toddler while I read to the older two. So it's, we both get to bed at about 9 o'clock and we're exhausted. And then, finding time to communicate can be a real struggle. Family has been difficult. We lived in Melbourne for the first 8 years of our marriage. And we both struggled to not have family around, especially with raising the kids. We went through a rough patch. I don't even know, maybe 5 years married. Andy was out with a friend, and I know Andy's very social, so I've always been very happy to let him go out with friends because that's his refreshment, I guess. It helps him to be more himself, whereas me curling up in a corner by myself with a book makes me more relaxed. And anyway, he came home one night after being with a friend and was quite upset, and because of our great communication, actually, he communicated, which was huge, but he told me that he'd kissed another woman. And obviously that was extremely difficult for me to hear. He'd had too much to drink and the friend had gone. So this one friend that he was out with had gone and he'd walked this woman to a tram stop. It wasn't someone he knew, it was a stranger. Anyway, he'd kissed her and that was bad. It was hard for me to hear because, I'm at home with the kids trying to help him and
someone who's very social, and one night I went out with a friend and really just drank too much and not meaning any harm or so forth, but I started talking to another girl and ended up kissing her, and I'm just like, oh, that was stupid and silly. That wasn't me because I was under the influence, but it was a really good lesson because we are flesh and blood. And just because you get married or you put a ring on or what have you, it doesn't make you Superman. And so you need to be very practical in the way you protect which is most important, which is in a marriage is your wife, is your spouse and your children.
It took me a long time to forgive him. A long time, I'm talking a couple of weeks, which is a long time for me. I'm a very quick forgiver. I forget very quickly. But I was able to talk to some work colleagues, some teachers at school and one of them had actually gone through a similar situation, and that was a huge help for me because I wouldn't have picked it from the outside, and that's why, you can never judge anyone's marriage from the outside. But her advice was great. And through prayer, I was able to forgive, but we laid ground rules from then. So
that when we go out and I socialise again, that I'm out with good friends, other, husbands in particular who, they're married as well and their wives don't want them running around like that either. So it's, expensive lessons, but we've really been able to kind of, I think, really grow from that. So being in New Zealand, I have a great love for the All Blacks, the rugby, right? So when I hadn't seen them play, the only time I saw them play was in 2004 and back in New Zealand in Dunedin. And so when they came to Brisbane last year for the Bledisloe Cup, I was like, wow, I was offered a ticket by an extended family member and I was really excited. So I went out early. This man was giving me a free ticket, my sister-in-law's brother. And so I thought, I'll go out and I'll buy him a few beers just to say thank you. And of course, you have a couple of beers and you have a few more and hey, you're excited. And so we watched the game and I was pretty rowdy. I was probably a little bit obnoxious, to be honest. And then just kind of went out afterwards and forgot that, I have a family at home, and then I'm expected to get up probably during the night and be up early in the morning and so forth. So getting a phone call from Angela, you're coming home, and we hadn't communicated properly about what time I was coming home. So I was annoyed because I was like, I don't get out much. I want to have fun. I've enjoyed the rugby and I'm enjoying catching up with some people. So yeah, we certainly were frustrated with each other that night. I'm very practical.
extremely practical and logical, and Andy's creative and but not very handy. I'm sure it's something that a lot of people go through, why can't you figure out where this dish goes in the kitchen since we've lived in the same house for 8 years, and it's always gone in that spot, and I'll come back and it'll be in another completely different spot, and I'm like, I don't know where it went. I'm like, but... So there's the household things that can be frustrating as a wife that, you want to be on the same page. And as much as we talked about it in our marriage prep, it doesn't mean that in the day-to-day that we remember everything about each other. And part of that is simply lack of sleep. And part of that is, it's not as important to him as it is to me. And I've got to accept that and move on.
Yeah, since we moved to Queensland from Victoria, we moved house. My father was getting quite sick. The lockdown was happening. I started one job that didn't work out. I started a new job. We moved house. My father, so we bought this, we signed the offer for this house on Christmas Eve morning, and then my dad died on Christmas Day back in New Zealand. That was pretty tough because we got this house primarily through his generosity. And there was a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And then so with work, I was at a particular company here in Queensland, and there was quite a lot of stress because there was a lot of sales and so forth. And so I got to a point where I said to Angela, I need some time off. I can't do this job anymore. And she goes, no, try and stick through it to probation, to the final review. And I just quit. It was too much. It was too much for me. And I probably should have communicated that better with Angela. I think there was a source of conflict with that because I thought that was my prerogative to do that. But as a married couple, you always you got to keep in that communication with each other. So yeah, there was a source of conflict there. But I'm really happy now because I'm speaking with a career coach, and we're looking at more opportunities that are going to fit me more rather than a sales role. So that's exciting.
I think one of the greatest things that has helped us in our marriage is holding each other accountable. In our management of the kids, management for want of a better word, that there's times when I lose my temper, and I've mentioned that before, but I've never kind of thought of that as how that impacted on Andy. I've always been the kind of family of you just get over it, right? But I can always justify myself of, well, they were really this, or Colette did this, or whatever, so-and-so did this. And there's always an excuse for bad behaviour if we look for it. But basically, Andy just saying, well, that's not okay, is enough to stop and think, well, actually, no, it's not okay. I'm the grown-up. I should be acting this way. So that's one thing that's, I think, has helped us really a lot is being accountable. Yeah,
and then also having that I guess it's a good dose of humility that when we, if you lose your temper with the kids or whatever and the other spouse isn't there, that I communicate that with Angela. Say, look, hey, darling, I kind of went off the handle a little bit this afternoon when you weren't here. I've apologised to the kids. But I wanted to let you know that this happened, because if you don't get that openness, that transparency, as much as you can, things just, stuff happens, and it's not good. Marriage is awesome, but it's a challenge, and it requires strength.
Andy's constant example of prayer. He has always prayed more than I have, and been a beautiful, humble example of it. It's not as though he's like, oh, everybody, I'm praying now. No, he'd just simply, go out for a walk and pray his rosary, or, read the Bible before bed. And those little examples have helped me, as well as an app that has recently helped us both, but to get back into prayer, and I couldn't have done it on my own. I don't know how couples where one spouse isn't Catholic or aren't of the same faith manage to get through, because I need the support of Andy, and
Well, likewise. And your spirituality it's such a huge resource, you know. I mean, you know, we're human. There's so much. There are many components to us. We need to make sure we're looking after ourselves physically, and you know, we're feeding ourselves, we're sleeping well. We have that interaction with others, other family members. Have that balanced kind of holistic approach on life. But the spiritual resource, it's so important, because at the end of the day, it's you've got to put so much in God's hands, because so much really is out of your control. So it's all that sense, control the controllables, and that big one is your prayer life, is your spiritual life. So yeah, it's a non-negotiable. The primary tool there of the marriage encounter weekends of dialoguing through writing down answers to specific questions and allowing the other spouse to read your answers, and then having that dialogue and that chat afterwards. That was something very novel, very innovative, and I think that's obviously helped a lot of people in the past, and it's going to help a lot of people in the future. So, in fact, I really highly recommend a weekend for anybody who's hearing about it for the first time or thinking about going on one. It's really it really opened a lot of things up for us.
I found Marriage Encounter very helpful in understanding Andy better, because, again, we've said it before, I'm very practical, I'm very logical, I'm very emotive as well, but like I said, I forget things quite easily. I don't hold a grudge. My emotions it flares up and then it goes away. And so Andy's very sensitive, and that's part of him, and I've known that, and we've been married, and I know he's sensitive, but often I've felt that was then therefore a need for me to tiptoe around an issue, avoid it if I can. And Marriage Encounter, well, number one, the phrase, no one's to blame for someone's emotions, was huge, because I'd always blamed him for his emotions. You feel sad, oh, well, that's your problem, get over it. And and to know that, sometimes, again, I feel things that I can't help, and you often blame that on a woman's hormones, but to know, to kind of put it on and say, well, Andy sometimes feels things that he can't help, and to understand that that's a feeling, that I'm not to blame, that he's not to blame, because that's where I'd often get anxious about things or angry about things, is because I blamed myself or I blamed him. But to go and to be able to sit and to dialogue about something and to say, okay, I didn't know you felt that, and that's okay. And that I'm not to blame, you're not to blame, but let's see where we can meet in the middle of helping or changing that, or because I don't want to do something that makes you feel sad or makes you feel anxious. I honestly found it really difficult, like I said before. In the moment after he'd kissed somebody else, I found that very difficult to forgive. And that was I think one of the first times in my life that I hadn't been able to forgive instantly. And, I did feel broken, and I wondered what I had done wrong. Again, asking counsel from others was a huge help to understand others who have gone through. I also, speaking to others and understanding, it's not forgiving the male mind, but understanding the male mind does help. That accountability was huge. And it was actually having Andy be accountable to me, I know, was very humbling for him. It was also very humbling for me. And it's hard to hear sometimes, it's hard to hear someone else's temptations when it's somebody that you love, and you wish they weren't there at all.
Absolutely. And especially as guys, you sometimes you just need to chat with another bloke, and just say, hey, this is going on in my life, you're struggling with it too. Let's keep each other accountable. You've had a fall or something's happened, get back up, get to confession. Let's go, man. Let's keep positive. As Ange said, that accountability, and it keeps marriages strong.
They'd say, it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to keep a marriage strong. Yeah. Andy's been really big with date nights, and it's not that I don't want them, it's just I get more caught up in the day-to-day. And, the kids, and it's too much effort to find a babysitter, but Andy's insistent, and we try to once a month or every 2 months, or sometimes it's every 2 weeks, 2 weeks, because we happen to have mum visiting, and then we've got someone else. So it's good. We make the most of having a babysitter in the house. And the kids are funny because they'll be like, what are you going to dinner again for? You did that like
Yeah.
just
Come on.
2 weeks ago. And to teach the kids, well, actually, we love time alone as well as time with them, and they don't quite understand it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a busy time as with young kids, and if you're not putting back, you can't give what you don't have. Whether it's if you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, you're not working out, you're not keeping yourself intellectually stimulated by reading, or just putting back into your relationship. If I've got nothing to give, then I'm just a useless husband. I'm just a corpse in my body. You got to give back and kindle that fire.
But that's definitely helped us get through, is being able to spend time together alone, and have family around to support us in that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just very lucky to have Jesus as my best mate, as my best friend since I was very little. Just having that fostered that sense of faith, and never pushed or shoved. I mean, parents are never perfect, but to have that natural friendship with Jesus, and he's now come into our marriage, and he's the centerpiece. We're going to have our house blessed, hopefully, very shortly, and we're going to put up our picture of the Sacred Heart, because he's the center.
My relationship with Jesus it's not just a spiritual one. It's, again, fits with my personality. It's a logical one. I've studied the faith and I'm convinced by it in a logical way, not just in a spiritual way. And not that I understand it all, but I just feel so much. I really feel the strength of God getting me through some days.
Are you searching for purpose of life? Discover your true identity. Stay tuned to Shalom World.